So I want to talk about why females are the demographic that should be focused on when you're trying to argue with people, um, to be righteous, when you're trying to focus on who to be prosecuting for crimes, who to be like who to be investigating, okay? And it has to do with biology, okay? It has to do with evolutionary tendencies. So in biology in college, they were trying to teach me that evolution is typically female choice. So it's not like the females are being ravaged by these strong males and like the males are making all the commands and the strong ones are, just no, it's the females that are actually making these demands and choosing who they're going to reproduce with. Okay, they're the ones that can be rebellious and start making demands and stuff, and the males are caving in, and they were telling me that evolution is female choice most of the time. Okay, so the females might be choosing the strong males. They might be choosing these flashy males with colorful feathers or something that is just nonsense. It doesn't have to do with survival. They might be choosing innovative males. They might be choosing certain traits like camouflage or whatever. But and then the competition amongst the females is dictating which females are reproducing. So like the females are choosing who's reproducing for the most part amongst the males, and they're competing with the other females to be the one that is making the choices. So it just has to do with biology. Women, they can only get pregnant like every 10 months or so. Okay, men can reproduce with many women every day. Okay, for like most of their life. Okay, women have a limited time frame that they can reproduce. uh, they're responsible for protecting the child, while they're pregnant. They're responsible for feeding the child in its early stages after it's born. uh, the physical males are usually out gathering resources while the females are watching over the children. Okay, so they're responsible for guarding the children and monitoring them. So, because of these things, female rebellion is catastrophic to the survival of the species. And a lot of males get terrified of this and just start adhering to the commands of the females. Okay, so if a male is rebellious and you take him out, okay, even if it's many males, if a bunch of males get rebellious and you take them out, all right, the remaining males can mate with multiple females every single day for like almost the rest of their life. Okay, but if a female gets rebellious, you know, it's more of a limiting factor on how many offspring can be produced. If you take out a female, well, now you only have the remaining ones that can reproduce. If a bunch of the females get rebellious and you have to take them out, when I have a small number of females that can reproduce, your population just got crushed. So this is why prostitution is like what, almost 90% female or something like that, maybe more. I don't know, but this is why there's this tendency for males to obey the demands of the females, while this is why a lot of females say that, oh, the men will kill for me, the men will do whatever I want, like all this stuff. Like they recognize that they have this manipulative position, and it's because of biology. So when you're focusing on who to be intimidating, to make society better, okay, you need to be focusing on these females that have this manipulative position, that are this temptation, that to the males, this fear for these males. So they might try to say, oh, you're a coward. You're just scared to be fighting males because they're so physical. You're going after the females. That's not true. Okay, you're going to have to fight these males anyways to get to these females. Okay, you're just focus on the females. That's the temptation most of the time. Okay, they're the ones that are telling these males to be crazy. All right? You hear stuff like, oh, women have no heart. Like, oh, she's just like a, they make songs about it. And look, it just has to do with being weak. Okay? being in a position where you don't have opportunity to, you know, to acquire resources, okay? Like the women are physically weak, so they rely on like they get tempted into being manipulative, to being rebellious, you know. Uh, they get desperate and they start going crazy and stuff. Like when you think about these demographics of people and crime rates and behaviors, okay, like weak men, they're known to be like manipulative and liars and like, like weaselly and stuff instead of just like physical. Okay, well, women are weaker than that. Okay, so and weak men get desperate a lot and they start doing crazy things and stuff. Like when you talk about impoverished people, people that don't have opportunities to to get educated or to get work and stuff, like they start being all manipulative and joining these unfounded causes and getting affiliated with these horrible groups and getting desperate and doing crazy things and adopting uh, horrible ideologies. Okay, it's about desperation and weakness. Okay, lack of opportunity. Okay, that's what would uh, cause females to, you know, get desperate and start trying to be manipulative, and they feel pressured and like they start abandoning righteousness and stuff out of psychotic fear, and they could get rebellious and start utilizing their biological position, their position in the reproduction process, you know, to try to gather resources. Okay, so they get rebellious. They turn to like prostitution and stuff, to violence, to manipulation. They try to get their pimps together. All right, so a lot of these men get tempted to be pimps, basically, and these women start to be prostitutes. Now, this can come in tons of different forms, okay? It could be a religion, like the woman starts prostituting herself out for this religion and she tries to get the men's to be pimps adopting the religion and stuff like that. It could be all kinds of stuff, okay? It could be like some nonsensical claim of a social justice cause, like I'm just telling you, the best way to go about this is to really go communicate with the women. You're going to have to fight through these pimps that they send after you to try to, defend their prostitute tactics at acquiring resources. But going and communicating with the women, okay, like prosecuting them or arguing with them or educating them, okay, if you could get them on your side, it's going to spark a very large-scale change. So you just have to understand what's going on here. Like, look, if you go focus on arguing with men, trying to convince men to be good and stuff, prosecuting the men and all that stuff, you might think that you could gather like a strong army to go intimidate people with. But, the men, they respond more to females than to males when it comes to argumentation. And a lot of the times they just fight like psychopaths for these females. Okay, there's like a deep fear within a lot of men of females. And if you convince males to be good, but the females aren't on board, well, there's not going to be any reproduction going on. But if you start convincing females, well, you don't need that many males to reproduce with a lot of females. So, if it came down to it, obviously we would have to engage in polygamy in that way. And people should be focusing on communicating with females anyways, when you're a male, because that's who you're supposed to be having a relationship with, okay? So don't let males get in the way of you communicating with females, okay? Don't let people try to say that you're perverted or you're a coward or something because you're trying to focus on communicating with females, convincing females to be good because of their influential potential, and your responsibility to be communicating with them. And just trust me when I say that that's the key demographic, okay? The female accusation goes a long way. So more on why to focus on females when it comes to educating them and convincing them and stuff like that. Okay, it's their manipulative potential. Okay, it's the catastrophic nature of female rebellion when it comes to the survival of the species. And think about their accusations. Okay, female accusations tend to go a long way. All right, if you start getting females to agree with you, or like if you get females to make honest accusations that actually start speaking out against other males, all right, all of a sudden you have a whole army of males that are now trying to address this accusation that the female is making, trying to protect the female. Like, the males want to adhere to her demands and be on her good side to be, considered for reproduction, or, to be endorsed for reproduction. Like the female would endorse the male to other females and stuff. Like, just the female manipulative power or the female influential power, okay, is something that needs to be recognized and utilized. Okay, this doesn't have to do with physical strength. It has to do with reproduction. All right. So when it comes to females interacting with females, okay, there's no reproduction going on there. So, they just like, they don't have any kind of temptation like that. So they just go after each other. Okay, you've heard of like cat fights and stuff, like, the female competition. So they like bully each other a lot. And if you could get the female to start endorsing you to other females, you know, it's just different than a male endorsing you to females. Like, the females intimidate each other. Okay, so when the females start endorsing you, all right, the other females are like, they might get intimidated by the female endorsement and just start to adhere to it. Okay, they can't manipulate each other sexually. So, like, it, you know, look, I'm just telling you, when when it comes to convincing a female to be good or convincing a male to be good, it's going to be more influential to convince the female. All right, it just is. Now, I'm not saying don't try to convince males at all. I'm just saying understand where your focus is. And when it comes to women, they need to focus on each other. Like, they need to recognize uh, their position and their manipulative potentials. Okay, and they need to focus on like addressing each other, when they're being bad. So when you educate the females, when you start to convince them to be good, well, they're going to go communicate with the males, what they've learned. Like, it's not like you have to be evenly distributing, your education towards people. Like, if you just educate the females for the most part, they're going to relay this information to the males. It's going to be part of their demands of the males when it comes to relationships. Okay, they're going to be voicing, what they've learned, what they're demanding, and it's just a better option. So I don't want you to be so focused on the physicality difference, thinking you have to have this army of males. Okay, this manipulative potential is, that's actually what is the problem right now. So I wanted to talk about accusations. Okay, when women start making false accusations, males get tempted to get on board with those false accusations to try to gain a position of good favor with the female for reproductive purposes. Okay, so males get tempted, to just do it. Like, if a female makes an accusation, oh, you better get on board, you better be on her good side. Like, so females aren't really like that, okay? They could all share the same male, all right? And it's not a problem. Like, they could all still get pregnant pretty much from just a few males, Like when the males start making accusations, they'll be like, oh well, this is just a disposable male when it comes to reproduction. Like, but when females start making accusations, okay, the males get tempted to get on board. So I want you to understand that the physicality doesn't really mean much when you're combating stubbornness. So if you're thinking you're going to convince a lot of males, to be good, and then physically intimidate females, okay, or even physically intimidate other males with a group of males, like when it comes to this stubbornness, like I think the females probably get more scared of each other. Okay, and just remember, I'm speaking like for the most part when I'm just speaking about tendencies and like stuff like that. But if you convince a female or a bunch of females to be good, well, all they have to do is withhold their reproduction, withhold their cooperation from the males, and you're going to see the males just start caving in. Because that's what they do currently. They withhold reproduction from males, and they make horrible demands of the males, and then the males adhere to these commands because they're moronic cowards, okay? And then they just turn into these murderous savages. So like, don't try to focus on the males and then go for the females later. Okay, focus on the females. Okay, deal with the males along the way because you're going to have to go through the males that are thrown at you, to get to these females. But, don't feel bad about ignoring males and focusing on females. You're supposed to be doing that anyway if you're a man, because that's who you're supposed to be seeking out for relationships and stuff. And that's the demographic that you're responsible for protecting. Like, these males are supposed to be protectors themselves. Like, you know what I mean? So, different expectations. And the females can just educate the males with what you're teaching the females. Okay, you don't have to go teach these males everything and have them educate the females. And these males that are acting like morons or harboring their savage females, like, no, just go focus on the females. Don't worry about what these people are trying to say about it. Okay, if they try to call you a pervert or something, just be like, you're going to have to argue about that kind of stuff. Like if you go around in public talking to a bunch of males, nobody says anything. But if you go around in public talking to a bunch of females, now all of a sudden everybody freaks out. It's because you're talking to the influential demographic. Okay, people notice. Okay, so these evil females, they want you to think that it's the male intimidation that's really controlling the world. All right, they're trying to distract from themselves. In reality, those males are answering to these females. Okay, they wouldn't be acting like that if these females weren't demanding it from them. Okay, but the females a lot of the time try to play the victim. They're like, oh, I'm just scared of this big bad male. He's just this savage person. Even if I were to, I'm not the one telling him to do that. No, I'm just scared of him. No. They just try to get people to be scared of their pimp or their pimps. Okay, the problem's the prostitute. Obviously, they're both a problem, but the source, like the influential part, the manipulative, the source of it. You got women saying, oh, I want it rough. I want a guy to beat me into submission. I want to get ravaged. I want to, like... You think men are telling them to say that? No, they're just coming up with it. They recognize it as a manipulative tactic. Men don't like that stuff, okay? It's just a lot of cowards cave in. A lot of women tell men to go rape other women, to go beat up and intimidate other women, okay? You need to recognize the desperation of the females, like their lack of physicality and their reliance on manipulative tactics for resource acquisition. It's just like the impoverished demographic. It's just like the uneducated demographic. It's just like the minority demographics. Okay, desperate, crime-ridden. It's just the females aren't physical, so they're not the ones. They manipulate others to do the crime for them, utilizing reproduction as their enticing thing. So they're not getting caught for violent crimes, but they're surely commanding them. Just don't. So yeah, with the females, it's a combination of desperation, okay, of fear and desperation, being in a position of weakness, lack of opportunity because of their physicality and their biology, like them, you know, being the child bearers and being the ones that feed the children and stuff, and the menstrual cycle. So it's a combination of this desperation due to their biological position and the utilization of their position in the reproductive system to manipulate, to rebel, to utilize, like, to hold ransom. So because they're so weak, they're easily um, they get scared easily, okay, and they turn to savagery. All right, they start worrying about their survival. They don't know how they're going to gather resources. They don't know how they're going to protect themselves, and then they just turn to savagery and manipulation. All right, it's just like poor people do it a lot. It's just like these minorities do it a lot. You know, it's just like uneducated people and stuff like that, weak people. So because of their position of desperation, they get tempted to utilize this tactic that they have unique in their gender compared to men. They have this unique tactic to be able to withhold reproduction. Okay, the men can't do that. All right, because men can reproduce with many women every single day for most of their lives. All right. So, if a man decides to withhold his reproduction, it's not a big deal. All right, the other men can reproduce a lot. If a woman does it, it's a big deal. So the women are in this unique position to withhold reproduction, to be prostitutes, okay, to start making demands, to start rebelling and utilizing that. And they do. And they're also in a position of weakness where they get scared and, like, they get tempted to utilize this tactic that they have. So what you have to do is you have to educate the women on the purpose of life, on the meaning of life. Okay, it's about love and fairness. All right, it doesn't matter how weak you are. It doesn't matter how much danger you're in. You cannot sacrifice your purpose. Like, you have to get that through to them, and it's going to be difficult because they are so scared. All right, they are so weak. Like, you have to get them to be accepting of the idea of sacrifice. Not turning to savagery to try to acquire resources and survive. Not turning to prostitution, savage, violent prostitution where they just go and sexualize murderers, just to bother people and start making demands, which is the typical route. Look, you need to be wise about what these women do. They sexualize murder. Okay, they are prostitutes in many different kinds of ways. All right, like, they're prostitutes to marry a rich person. They're prostitutes to get a car bought for them. They're prostitutes to get a job. They're prostitutes to acquire resources and protection. All right, and they utilize this tactic of, I'm going to withhold my reproduction and I'm going to start sexualizing violence just to bother people and get attention and start making demands and asking for money and, having people, like, try to reason with me. And it's a prostitute. Prostitutes are, like, what, 90% female or something? Like, that's what it is. That's the issue in the world. Okay, is this stuff, like, that's the problem. Okay, it's not that there's all these big bad men that are, like, it's not this, like, what is it? It's not this misogynistic world where the men are in charge. Look, in a college biology class, they were telling me, look, it's female choice. Evolution is female choice. The women are running things. They make the demands. The males are scared of their rebellion. The males are scared to be looked down upon from the females, to not be chosen. They just start trying to please the females. They go dancing for the females. They go flashing their colors for the females. They go fighting the other males for the females. You know, the females are in the unique position to actually have something to hold over the other gender when it comes to their rebellion in terms of reproduction and in terms of protecting the child. You see women bragging about it all the time. Oh, I don't have to lift a finger. I can manipulate men any way I want. I can get whatever I want. I just have to start, being a thirst trap. And like, what do you think is going on here? Okay, I can get that man to kill for me. Like, okay, they're manipulating you to think that it's all these big bad men that are causing the problem. No, it's these rebellious women that are telling these men to be violent. And the men are just absolute cowards caving into these women. Okay? Nice guys wind up single. It's a common theme. The women go around saying, I don't like nice guys. Okay? Because they can't manipulate them. They can't utilize them to intimidate people, in a savage way. The nice people wind up oppressed and single. Okay? There's this, like when people are like, oh, it's a jungle out there. Ugh. Nice guys finish last. All this stupid stuff like that. Like, I'm just really trying to get it through to you that, look, it's not about the physicality. It's about the manipulation. It's about having something held over the other gender's head when in terms of reproduction. Okay, the physicality is not what's running things. It's that reproductive aspect. So I'm really just trying to tell you that acquiring an army of men with all that physicality is not going to be as effective as acquiring an army of women with the reproduction that they hold hostage. I'm just telling you, the men cave in to the demands of the women. It's more effective to focus on women. Okay? The women get all like stubborn and stuff, and they don't respond to the physicality of the males. Okay? They don't get intimidated and back down and stuff. They like get stubborn to the end. Like they're holding on to their stubbornness for this tactic to try to acquire resources out of desperation. All right? So when you're trying to so look, you're not even going to be able to get through to these males. Okay? They're so caught up over these women, like if you try to focus on the males, you're not even going to be able to get through to them. Okay, you need to focus on the women. And yeah, the women respond to intimidation, but you really need to like, and when I say intimidation, I don't want some crazy ass women start saying, making false accusations saying I'm trying to be like criminal towards them. Okay, I'm talking about, threatening them with rightful prosecutions, okay, notifying their jobs about their behavior, okay, telling the community about what they do, like exposing them, all right? So, like, they do go ballistic a lot and get real desperate and, like, just absolutely spaz out. But, they do respond to intimidation, okay, like sometimes. And, you have to get through to the source of the problem, which is their philosophy. So you have to educate them on, their questions about life. What is the meaning of life? Okay, any religious questions that they may have, stuff like that. What is the scientific explanation of what's going on here? Like, recognize that they are in a position of weakness. They face a different kind of fear. Okay, they're scared of each other. They're scared of the men that the other women can manipulate to harm them. And they need to be emboldened by understanding their purpose. So I think I'm being very understandable on why people need to focus on women. Okay, men are pretty simple to convince to do something once you have women to entice them with. Okay? So understand that women tell men to do savage things a lot, okay, and that's the source of the problem a lot of the times, okay, prostitutes and pimps, all right? And so look, when these simplistic men are like looking at other men and who to admire, a lot of the times they're just like, "Oh, that man gets so many women. You know, I need to do it. He's a thug, he's a gangster and he gets all these women. You know, I'm going to go do that." Well, the women are telling that guy to be a thug and a gangster. Okay, that's their pimp. All right? You got these thugs making songs about being pimps for these savage women. Okay, they're telling them to do that. The women throw out false accusations and stuff to try to protect their pimp. Like, they start using their sexuality to entice people, trying to protect their pimps and stuff, enticing the government, you know, getting all sexual with the law enforcement and stuff to try to entice them to not do their job, entice them to abuse their power. Like, these women are aware of their tactic. Okay, they act nonsensical. They act outrageous. They try to bother. They try to get this negative attention. They try to get people to plead with them. Okay, they start making demands. All right, all they're doing is withholding reproduction. Okay, they're aware of their unique position in the reproduction process. Their biology. So you have to get through to these women and get a bunch of women on your team so the men are like, "Oh, wait, hold on, he has a bunch of women, and they're nice women. That's even better." Like, and they're just going to come flocking. But you need the women to convince these cowardly, simplistic moron men. Okay? So the women throw men after you when they notice that you're trying to get to them. Okay? They start trying to act like you're some kind of pervert because they recognize you're coming after their tactic of resource acquisition. Okay? Their prostitute tactic. Okay? Their savage menace tactic. But you need to get through to them because that is, the prevalent source of the manipulation, of the violence, of the savagery. All right, it's just prostitutes and pimps. It's very simple. They call it the oldest profession, prostitution. Like, freaking apes do it. Okay? So these prostitutes boost up the violent male that they've manipulated into being a savage because he was such a coward and he caved in, wanting to be approved by the women and, get to have the reproductive, like, get chosen for reproduction. So, they got this cowardly savage male that they're toting around to try to get the other males to, be enticed by his behavior because he's getting all these women, and they try to act like he's intimidating these women. But no, the women are telling him to do that. Okay, they're not scared of him. They control him. Okay, the pimp works for the prostitute. It's not the pimp scaring the prostitute into being a prostitute. No. The pimps are disposable for the prostitutes. They just have to go manipulate some other guy, tell him to take out the other dude, and like it's just this whole stupid manipulative game. Okay, they don't take life seriously. They say they don't care about life, like they don't care about love. They're just savages. Just all this disgusting behavior. All right, it comes from this gender, okay, that is in a position of weakness and has this opportunity to be manipulative reproductively, and they just utilize that manipulation to acquire an army, okay, to do violence for them because they're weak and they don't do it themselves. All right, they get other women on board, okay? They threaten each other. Like I'm telling you, men get enticed by women, okay? Men get scared when the women start withholding the reproduction. All right, so get the women on your side by actually, like, getting them to accept righteousness, okay? They have to acquire this understanding. Like, you're gonna have to actually get through to them to be loving. So focus on getting these women to be loving. The men are gonna go chasing after them. Okay, now you have an army of men. You have these women, you know, to intimidate the other women. All right. They're not going to fall for the other women's reproduction, like, uh, manipulation. These righteous women are going to be making rightful accusations instead of false accusations. They're going to be able to combat the false accusations of the savage women. Okay. These dumb, cowardly men, they adhere to these accusations from women because they try to get on the good side of the women to be in a position to reproduce. It's not about the physicality, okay? It's not the men that are in control of this stuff, all right? It's the manipulative, these women, okay? They tell men to be savage. They say they don't like nice, it's not because they're scared, okay? It's because they see it as an opportunity. It's greed. Like, they know that they could easily, just say that they like nice guys, and then the guys are going to be nice. They're going to get all these big, strong, nice guys that take care of their bodies and go fight crime. And it's like, they know they can do that, but they choose not to because it's not profitable for them. Okay, they can't be a prostitute like that. They can't get all this money, and they're not physical. They can't make money working. Okay, they lean on prostitution and manipulation and savagery. So get the women on your side. You're going to actually have to get through to them and get them to understand love. Okay, it can't be some kind of superficial, thing. Like, these women actually have to know what's going on. So actually get through to women. It's not just about getting them to submit without actually understanding why. Okay, like, yeah, that would be helpful to get the crime rates down, but what would be most effective is that if they were actually loving. So actually try to get through to these women. Okay, the men are going to be so happy to see loving women. They're going to go flocking after them. Okay, that's just how these men are. Okay, it's pretty rare to find a loving woman. Look, if you can convince these women to be good, now all of a sudden you're the guy with all these women. All right? And then the other guys are like, oh, I want to be like him. And that's how you convince the guys. And the women can educate the guys for you. You don't even really need to communicate with the guys. The guys get in a relationship with these women that you've educated, and they could talk to each other. Just trust me that it's less about the physical nature and intimidation of men, and it's more about the reproductive manipulation of women. Okay, they talk about it in college biology classes. So focus on getting the women to understand what love is. Focus on getting the women to submit, at least for them to stop being like such savages. And these men are going to follow. All right, it's not like you're a coward and you're not willing to, put up a fight against the men. You are putting up a fight against the men to even get to these women. Okay, you're actually putting up more of a fight by not only dealing with the men that the women throw after you, but actually getting to the woman and dealing with them. So just trust me, you need to focus on acquiring the women so they can withhold reproduction in the right way. Okay, for them to demand righteous relationships instead of demanding savagery, for their own prostitute gain. Any relationship that doesn't have to do with love is prostitution.